This was a visitor I won't so easily forget. A young girl no older than 8 who became my greatest tormentor for almost 3 years straight. And why? All because I enjoyed scaring my housemate, not realizing that whilst partaking in that hobby, I was manifesting this fear into existence. Now, I was in two minds about whether to begin with the story itself or the fear, but I've decided to first share the torment I endured before moving on to that of my housemate. Little May, that's what we came to call her, first began revealing herself through the voice of the pet cat. This little shit cat was afraid of my room after getting locked in there on moving day. The wind having blown the door closed, locking him in, he never visited that room again. However, his treat cravings sometimes outgrew that fear, and he would be brave enough to sit right outside the bedroom door, meowing through the crack. Back then, my unhealthy pale bodysuit often couldn't survive a whole day and regularly napped, often waking to the sound of this meowing. But as time passed, these noises began to sound less like a meow and more like human words. Most commonly heard was my name. Now, waking up to your name being called isn't necessarily terrifying, especially if you live with a friend. But when your friend is male and the voice itself is that of a small child, then the fear factor is turned up ever so slightly. Even more so when you make eye contact with the cat in question from your bed through the crack in the door. To continue hearing your name being repeatedly called, beckoned, until you blink the sleep from your eyes and then everything turns back to normal. The cat would get his treats, now realizing I was only encouraging this creepy behavior, and we continue on with the day. This went on to happen a few times over the next few weeks, exploding head syndrome, presumably. Then I saw her, just standing there beside the window, her frame almost drowned out by the curtain draped behind her. She had long black hair, unfortunately very much like the Grudge girl, and paler skin than I, which is quite a statement in itself. And she just stared that first night, and I stared back. She never spoke, she never called my name. I almost felt as if she was afraid of me. We met again the next night, and then the next, and then the next. One day I saw her with some flowers. That was sort of sweet, I guess. Now the thing about this household I lived in, it was one giant musical. You have a theory about something? Darling, we have a theory it could be bunnies. You need a fork? Sweetie, I got 20. We were always bursting into song, and as it turns out, little May rather liked that. So much so that one night she gathered the courage and used her timid voice to ask me to sing to her. Now, just a reminder about a small detail I may not have yet mentioned. Every night when I woke up and saw little May, I was paralyzed. I can't move, I can't talk, I couldn't scream for help, but most importantly, I couldn't sing. Now what happens when you disobey a small child? The assholes throw a tantrum, of course. The crying, the screaming, the mouth stretching and contorting into a shape and scream I can still hear and see to this day. This was mine and little May's fallout. Our nights of quietly and patiently staring at each other uncomfortably whilst waiting for me to go back to sleep were over. Gone was the sweet, quiet, creepy little girl, and hello to the devil spawn. My mental health took a downturn. It was, in all honesty, already spiraling, but the added bonus of a screaming, lullaby-humming, demanding child who could scale the walls, stopping me from sleeping, only made things worse. To sleep means to wake, and waking up at the wrong time means a visit from little May. The only positive side of having little May as a visitor is that my older tormentor couldn't visit. I instead slept more during the day, sometimes waking to the sounds of my name being called through the crack in the door. But the sun was out, and the cat needed treats. My friend and I lived together for almost 3 years, and when I moved out of the house and into my own place, I never saw little May again, and I welcomed back the man with the blade. Now from one perspective, you could say that little May was a presence who lived in that house. After all, the torment of my housemate began one day when we were talking about weird things that had been happening. How his boyfriend's glasses keep falling off the bedside table, books off the bookcase, the kettle boiling itself, the cat just acting oddly, which to be honest was no surprise. Just little things really, but little things like that scared him. And oh, how I enjoyed the fact they scared him. I made up my own things, just little believable things to get the ball rolling. And it was during this conversation where he discovered it. He was leaning against the wooden arch that separated the dining room from the living room when it caught his eye. He leant down ever so slightly, gaze fixed on the wood, and he nervously chuckled. Curiosity arose, I got up to look, and he showed me how one word was engraved on the wooden archway. It was the word May. It's like the gods had witnessed me tormenting my housemate and rewarded me with more ammo. They rewarded me with a name. May, I said. That's what she must be called. Who? He asked. Well, I replied, the one who doesn't like the books you read, I guess. He was, after all, a yaoi reader, so of course a ghost would knock that off the bookcase, right? So thus little May had a name, and it didn't stop there. We found her name not only engraved on the archway, but within the kitchen cupboards, on the garden fence, and written in green felt tip pen underneath the dining room table that came with the house. Evidence that this was a child, a menace even when alive. And every time we found a new location, my excitement grew. Not at the possibility of a ghost, no, at the possibility of scaring my housemate further. It was brilliant. He and his boyfriend were terrified. It was a success. Until it wasn't. Because not long after this torment, my own began. The haunting began. And yes, it's very easy to say that little May was a real child who shared the same favourite colour as I do. I too would pick the green felt tip pen to write my name in when my parents aren't looking. It's easy to say that little May still lives in that house. Did we even discover a real ghost that I can somehow see yet unable to communicate with? Or the more obvious theory that my imagination is so corrupt I literally write my own nightmares. I never used to play or watch anything horror related for a reason. Too often something I'd witnessed would emerge when the lights go out. That was the conclusion I came to. I lived in my head too much, and I manifested her into being, into existing. At least that's what I tell myself, but it has been 7 years, and she's still very real in my eyes. And yet I've not seen her since that last night in the house. I wish you well, little May, but I am sorry I couldn't sing for you.